Hey everyone! Wipe is upon us, and that means now everyone gets a fair shot at starting. So now's the best time to start. I know a majority of you will be new and upcoming players, and if not, you clicked on this video looking for tips. So I'll be going over everything I can to provide getting into Wipe. Here's timestamps for anything you might be looking for specifically. I don't want to waste your time, so let's just get right into it. Choosing your class. Choosing between USEC and Bear is the very first option you'll be given starting out. The short answer is to pick USEC, and the long answer is it's kind of up to your preference. Now, besides cosmetic and voice, there are only two big differences. One being what you start with in your stash, and two being how rogues see you. Firstly, let's get stash out of the way. As a USEC, you're American, so you'll have American weapons, such as the M4, M9A3, etc., etc. As a Bear, you're Russian, so you get Russian weapons, AK, the Grok, etc. Honestly, if you're just starting out, this doesn't really make a difference at all. It's really just entirely up to what guns you think are cooler, as realistically talking, the difference between them at this point is next to zero. Now, about the rogues. Basically, they're at the moment only on a certain section of a specific map, Lighthouse, where if you're a Bear, they'll kill you on sight, and their sight is ridiculous. With the USEC, they're slightly more lenient, but if you do engage them or aggravate them, they will kill you as well. But because of that instant kill on sight that Bears have, I typically pick USEC just to be safe. Basic game mechanics. On the topic of rogues, some things aren't quite readily known when you start Tarkov. I'll go over a lot of the most important ones quickly. Firstly are map borders. These are typically enforced by either a wall, an invisible sniper, or landmines. The latter two are usually alluded to with signs, so you have to be wary. Secondly, there are a lot of different lootable containers. Here are the most important ones so you don't miss them. They include weapon boxes, wooden crates, PCs, and the various bodies scattered around Tarkov. Thirdly, scavs do not attack you if you are a scav. You can typically tell a scav away from a PMC by quipping when you press F1 and listening for them to quit back. Typically, player scavs will quit between each other to make sure that they're too safe. If you don't hear a quit back, it's still probably not a PMC, but it's best to avoid them nonetheless. The fourth and last tip is a very short lesson on ammo and its best use. Now granted, this is my opinion, so take it with a grain of salt. I would recommend trying out everything you can and figuring out what you like best for all the different kinds of ammos. But typically, you want to go with the best penetration you can afford. If not, try going with something specifically with the highest damage and shoot them in the legs, where they have no armor. Trying to penetrate even basic armor with something that doesn't pierce is the equivalent of sneezing on a Victorian-era child. It might kill them, it might not. Who really knows?
Traded.
Picking your first loadout. Something I see a lot of tutorials / tips miss is what you should be taking in a raid. Now this can vary a lot depending on your playstyle, what you're trying to accomplish, and the map. But I'll cover what you should generally be taking into every raid. You'll need a gun, of course, armor, including a helmet, and a chest rig. If you want to collect loot, then you'll more than likely need a backpack. And I like to be safe and bring food just to spare. All the extra necessities, as they call them, are at least 2 heavy bleed stoppers, at least an AI2 or something with at least 100 healing, and at least 2 light bleed stoppers, along with some kind of headset. Also at least 2 spare magazines and ammo to reload your magazines. And this will cover your basic raid. Don't be afraid to mix it up, of course. Play with whatever you like, whatever you're comfortable with. What's the best beginner map? This question is kinda stupid. Each map is just about completely different, rewarding and diminishing different playstyles in various areas, and with their own places of interest and general kind of player base attached to them. But I understand why picking a map can be tough, as they're huge typically, and it's scary committing to a map that might just be too hard, quote unquote. So I'll rank the top beginner maps I'd recommend to you now, and go into detail on each after. Starting at first is Ground Zero. Second is Customs. Third is Shoreline. Fourth is Reserve. And fifth is Lighthouse. Ground Zero is the newest map to Tarkov, and honestly, they kinda cooked with it. It's big enough to prevent crazy gunfights every raid, has pretty decent starting loot, and lots of areas you can go for it. The fighting styles on the map are varied, with there being lots of close quarter combat, but also some open air potential. And it has the bonus of being level locked to level 21, which means once you're above level 21, you can no longer get into a game with level 20 and below players. This is extremely helpful starting out, as sweaty players will quickly level up and leave that queue, and you'll be safe with players of your own level. Also, as a small plus, all your beginner quests are here, so you might as well learn them to figure out where those are. Customs is certainly a well-respected choice for second, and honestly, it'd be my first choice if Ground Zero wasn't level locked. It's widely known to be a beginner map, as it's quite similar to Ground Zero size-wise, and with multiple points of interest. It's easy to learn, but hard to master, and there's lots of loot potential, along with having 2 bosses. I don't play this map typically just for fun, but I have nothing against it, and I've just about memorized it casually running quests around in the area. Shoreline is a little bit iffy to immediately start out on, as the majority of its best loot is locked away in the resort, which is stuck behind keys. But it's still very fun and a genuinely entertaining map, and it's big plus wooded enough to make it hard for some players to accidentally interact. Once you're level 15, I'd recommend buying up some specific Shoreline keys and running those rooms for lots of money, which I'll make a video on my favorite later. Overall, not the best to start out on immediately, but once you've got some money in the bank, it's a very nice way to make more. These last two might be a bit controversial, but let me explain. I'm going to put Reserve at 4 because of its insanely good loot potential. It's a bit bigger than Customs, but a little bit smaller than Shoreline, and it's pretty wide open. It has a lot of open range and close quarter combat potential, and can have insanely good loot throughout the entire wipe. It, however, is not very PMC friendly. The extractions are a little rough and hard to get to, and most PMCs will head to the bunker for loot, where a majority of the good loot and one of the main extracts are. It's high risk, but high reward, and I'm personally all for it. Whether you want to commit to that is up to you though. Probably the most controversial pick, my 5th is Lighthouse. Now, Lighthouse gets a lot of bad rep for its design and lack of POIs, but as I'm learning it, honestly it's better than any of the other maps I could list here. You can get very good early game gear off of rogues, although fair warning, I'm going to take a wild guess and assume literally everyone else on the map will be trying to do the same thing. And there's also pretty good loot in the chalets. It's definitely not the best, but if you're dead set on trying everything, I'd recommend it more than the other maps. Now that there's the 5 I recommend, why don't I recommend the others? Obviously, the lab is not a beginner friendly map. I'm not even going to go through the trouble of explaining why. Streets is pretty big and quite detailed, so it's hard to learn as the first map, and it's quite competitive. Interchange is very intense, and if you get into a gunfight, it's nearly impossible to escape due to the long straight corridors and the encramped buildings. And it can be pretty rough, but it's not bad. Factory, in my opinion, is far too PvP based for someone new to the game to come out alive with any experience realistically. Woods is a fucking nightmare. You will get lost, and you will stay lost until you die out of nowhere from a sniper, an unseen landmine, or of starvation. I do not recommend Woods whatsoever. And there's everything. I'll make a more detailed map guide soon, so subscribe if you want to be notified of that. On to the next step. How to survive in raid. Now, obviously you're going to want to survive your raid. How else will you gain anything? Firstly, I want to get it out of the way. Dying is a part of Tarkov, and you're going to die a lot. Sometimes it'll be far and few between, sometimes after a fun gunfight, and sometimes just over and over again when you're trying to complete a quest. And that's okay. You win some, you lose some, and even the best players can end up going half and half on their survival percentages. The best 2 tips right off the bat I could recommend is 1. Know what you're going into a raid for, and 2. Don't bet on the raid giving you anything. Have a plan or idea of what you want to do in the raid, so you can understand where you have to go to get where you want, get what you want, and get out. Aimlessly wandering around can be an okay way of finding fights and loot, but ultimately it's wasting very precious time. And my second tip has to do with expecting to find something in raid that you need, like food, ammo, heals, etc. I guarantee you that you will not find that item and get fucked for it. Always, always bring what you need and just keep what you want as extra. There's a lot more I could talk about survival wise, but honestly that deserves its own video, so stay tuned for that if you're interested. Oh, and I don't think I want to make a whole topic out of it, but let's talk about gear fear really quickly. Everyone has gear fear. You're going to know exactly what I mean by gear fear the second you experience it. And you're going to suffer a long time if you don't get over it. The gear rotting in your stash that you're afraid to run because it's super good is not yours. It is Tarkov's gear, no matter what. Only 3 outcomes can come of that gear. You die wearing it, and someone else gets it. You sell it for money, or it's completely destroyed on wipe. Completely removed. No matter what, it will completely and utterly disappear one day, and whether you use it or not, it will go. I could talk a lot more about it, but that's what I'll say in a nutshell, so I hope that helps. Figuring out your playstyle. This is something that a lot of new players can struggle with for a long time, as it can be hard to want to play a certain way that isn't rewarded by the game. For example, sniping on certain maps can be very tough, or in very predictable spots. However, the best way to solve this is to simply mess around. Don't use the best guns, but instead ones you haven't tried yet. Mess around with a shotgun, try out a bolt action, use a caliber you haven't tried yet. It's all in the game for a reason. I see a lot of mid-tier and higher level players just kind of like stuck and binded to the meta, where they have to use the best guns with the best gear, go to all the specific places of interest for all the best amount of money, and ultimately that will burn you out. You're going to get burnt out, right? There's only so much fun you can get out of the fights with other people and watching your rubles pile up. Ultimately, it's going to get boring and it's going to get stale. The ultimate point of this game is to have fun. So if you're not, please try and do something different for that. Finding a friend. One of the best ways to survive longer in this game, along with having more fun, is to find someone to play it with. I would really recommend a second or a third player with you. Right? Duos and trios can be really fun. It makes playing the game a lot easier with a second or third set of gun. And although the loot tends to be a little bit scattered between you, it's still, in my opinion, the best way to play the game. Right? Running solo can be kind of a nightmare on PvP, and having someone to share that load with is always infinitely nicer. You can find people on the Reddit forums, on the wiki forums, and even in the official Tarkov Discord, where there's dozens and dozens of channels dedicated solely to finding someone to play with, right? And who knows, maybe they're a cool person. Maybe you'll end up, meeting a good friend. I've met lots of cool people through there that I still talk to this day. And ultimately, as I said earlier, this game is to have fun. If you're sucking solo, if you're not having the best time, find someone new to play with. Right? There are always going to be new people. And yeah, there's the video. Sorry if it's a little rushed. Sorry if it's a little scatterbrained. I wanted to put this together before wipe, so people coming into the game hopefully can find this and figure out something new to use, or just any kinds of tips and tricks they can use to help them survive. And if you are coming into Tarkov as a new player, I do truly welcome you from the bottom of my heart. I hope you have an amazing time. I hope you have lots of friends, and I hope you die as little as possible. Right? Tarkov currently has a big issue with the skill gap between the player base getting bigger and bigger, where the people that have been playing are getting much, much, much better over time, and the people that aren't as good, or the people starting out, simply can't keep up, and they're going to get shit on time after time after time. And this is why we need to encourage new people to play, so we constantly have a new low and middle ground for this area. Not so high level players can just pad out their kill death ratio, but so we actually have like a living, breathing player base, right? Where anyone of any skill level can, play the game and get out, I originally hopped to PvE because although I have definitely gotten a lot better at the game, I end up dying again and again to these level 40, level 60 sweats that just kind of leached the fun out of me, right? I'm not that good, obviously, but I'm good enough to, try and avoid, right, lower level players, whereas I'm still getting clowned on by these people 20, 30 levels ahead of me. And of course, you can't really be mad at the game for people being good at it, but it still is kind of a general player-based problem. So Tarkov can take a bit to get into, right? Tarkov is very different than any other shooter, any other loot and scoop, any game on the market right now. And that's why it can be pretty jarring, pretty different, right? The gunplay is pretty different, the concept is pretty different. Everything about it's typically just like pushed to be as hard as possible. But it is genuinely fun. It's genuinely exhilarating. So if you do even enjoy it a little bit, I would recommend sticking through, and hopefully you can enjoy the game more. And hey, hopefully meet a couple friends on the way. And yeah, that's about it. If you're a new player, welcome to Tarkov. I hope you have the best of luck in your survival. I'll be posting a map guide of all the maps I mentioned earlier, and their best loot spots, where people tend to go, and best ways to get around along with their extracts, possible loot containers, and everything I can on the map. So if you are new or interested in that kind of thing in general, make sure to subscribe so you'll be notified of it. Otherwise, that's about it. I really hope you enjoy the new wipe, and you stay safe and have fun. Welcome to Tarkov.